What do you do when the night you expect to be full of joy turns into a nightmare? Serafina had just received the promotion of her dreams and couldn't wait to celebrate with her husband, Jasper, and his mother on their 5th wedding anniversary. But what was supposed to be a joyous occasion quickly turned into humiliation. Instead of applause, she was met with anger and a shocking betrayal. Jasper, in a fit of rage, threw the anniversary cake at her. The evening shattered in that moment, and Serafina realized that something had to change. Stay tuned to see how Serafina reclaims her life, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. A surge of excitement coursed through me as I thought about my latest promotion, and I couldn't wait to share the news with my husband Jasper and my mother-in-law, Mrs. Lancaster, on our 5th wedding anniversary. I imagined laughter, maybe a few toasts, and the warmth of celebration. But everything I expected for the night shattered beyond recognition. Instead of a joyous occasion, I was met with an anger so intense it left me breathless. In an unimaginable twist, Jasper stood up and, with one swift motion, grabbed the anniversary cake and threw it directly onto my head, leaving me drenched and stunned. The shock was overwhelming, but underneath the disbelief, something fierce and burning ignited within me. I couldn't just walk away from this toxic relationship. I needed revenge. Just weeks later, everything in my life began to change in ways I never saw coming. What followed left everyone speechless. My name is Serafina, a financial analyst living in Boston, and life truly can turn on a dime. I used to think everything was going according to plan. My life, my marriage, it all seemed perfect. But that night, on our 5th wedding anniversary, everything shifted. I remember it vividly. The golden light of the setting sun casting its glow over the city, while I buzzed with excitement. I had just received the promotion I had worked so hard for. It was a milestone I had been chasing for years. I prepared to share this success with Jasper and Mrs. Lancaster, eager for their support, hoping for a celebration full of smiles, laughter, and toasts to my hard work. The restaurant was chic, bathed in soft lighting, and the gentle clinking of glasses echoed around us. I looked around the table, appreciating the elegant surroundings and the company. Jasper had always been my greatest supporter, or so I thought. He smiled at me, his eyes bright with anticipation, as I gathered the courage to announce my news. "Jasper, Mrs. Lancaster," I said, heart pounding, "I have some fantastic news. I've been promoted to senior financial analyst." I waited for cheers, applause, or at least a few words of congratulations. Instead, I was met with suffocating silence. Mrs. Lancaster's expression darkened in an instant, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. "Is this why we raised him?" she spat, her voice venomous with disdain. "To be overshadowed by his wife's career?" I blinked, stunned by the sharpness of her response. Pride, support, even a simple smile, those were the reactions I had expected. Instead, I felt like I had just committed a crime. Jasper shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes betraying the conflict tearing at him. He wanted to support me, but he was caught between his wife and his mother. "Mom, it's great news for Serafina. We should be celebrating her achievement," he said weakly, but his voice lacked any conviction, the words hollow in the air. Mrs. Lancaster wasn't finished. "What about starting a family, Serafina? Do you think a promotion can replace the joy of children?" Her words were like a knife cutting straight through me, and I felt a surge of anger rise within me. I took a slow, steadying breath, struggling to keep my composure. "I believe I can balance both my career and family, Mrs. Lancaster. This promotion means a lot to me." Jasper looked down at the table, avoiding my gaze. "Serafina, maybe we should consider what Mom's saying," he murmured, his tone cool and distant. My heart sank. This wasn't the supportive partner I thought I had married. "I can't just quit my job to meet your mother's expectations," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I deserve respect for my hard work." The tension grew thick, and I could feel the eyes of other diners on us. Jasper's demeanor shifted, and I saw the frustration building. "You're being unreasonable, Serafina. You're my wife, not my competitor. Why can't you see that?" His words stung even more than any physical pain could. "This isn't a competition, Jasper. I'm trying to share my success with you. I replied, voice trembling, tears threatening to spill. Mrs. Lancaster leaned in, her gaze piercing. You need to think about what's best for this family, not just your career ambitions. I felt trapped. This is who I am, and I won't give it up, not for anyone. I snapped, anger and desperation fueling my words. I was fighting for more than just my career. I was fighting for my identity. Jasper stood abruptly, his body tense. You just don't get it, do you? You're putting your career above everything else. Marriage is about sacrifice. In that instant, I saw his mother's influence twisting his perception of our marriage into something suffocating. I had always believed we were a team, but now I felt like a stranger in my own life. Sacrifice shouldn't mean losing yourself, I retorted, my cheeks burning. I deserve to have my dreams too. The argument reached its peak, and in a shocking moment, Jasper reached for the cake and, in a blind rage, threw it directly onto my head. Gasps echoed around the restaurant, silencing conversations. I stood there, covered in cake, feeling humiliated. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. My heart pounded, and I felt the betrayal sting more than any physical pain. As I stood there, tears streaming, I realized this was a turning point. The trust I once had in Jasper crumbled. I pushed the cake off my face, heart racing, a surge of resolve rising within. I couldn't let this define me. I would reclaim my life. The evening had begun with excitement but ended in chaos. As I left the restaurant, a whirlwind of emotions coursed through me. Anger, fear, and a glimmer of hope. It was time for a change, and I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. As I stumbled out into the night, the cool air grounded me in reality. Humiliation washed over me, not just because of Jasper's actions, but because of how the entire evening unfolded. What should have been a celebration had turned into a nightmare. As I drove home, the events replayed in my mind, each moment sinking deeper, leaving me in disbelief. How had it come to this? The man I loved had thrown a cake at me, and his mother's influence had poisoned everything. I thought about the life we had built together, the dreams I once held close. Now I felt like a ship lost at sea, tossed around with no anchor, no direction. When I finally reached home, the silence hit me like a physical force. I dropped my keys on the counter, feeling the weight of the moment, still stunned by what had just happened. The walls seemed to press in on me, and I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. No messages from Jasper, no apologies, no concern, just an empty screen. I dialed my closest friend and colleague, Juniper. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could understand this crushing pain. After a few rings, she picked up. Serafina, is everything okay? Her voice was thick with worry. No, Juniper, it's not. You won't believe what just happened. My voice trembled, the words barely escaping. What happened? Are you all right? She pressed, concern rising in her tone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I announced my promotion at our anniversary dinner, and everything fell apart. Mrs. Lancaster lashed out, and then Jasper threw the cake at me. I whispered, still in shock, trying to process the cruelty of it. A long, heavy silence stretched between us. Oh my God, Serafina, are you hurt? She asked, her voice tight with alarm. I'm fine physically, but emotionally, I don't know. I feel like everything I believed about our marriage has shattered, I admitted, my voice breaking, the weight of the realization sinking in. Listen, you need to get out of that situation. You don't deserve to be treated like this, Juniper said firmly, her words a lifeline pulling me away from the brink of despair. I know, but it's complicated. We've been together for years, and I thought we were happy, I replied, my voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Sometimes the people we love can change, especially under pressure. You need to think about what's best for you now, she urged, her voice gentle but resolute. A wave of realization washed over me as I listened. I had sacrificed so much for this relationship, giving more than I should have, and now I was left feeling empty, lost, and alone. I think I need to talk to a divorce attorney, I whispered, The words foreign but strangely liberating, like a door finally opening after being locked for so long. Do it. I'll be here for you every step of the way, Juniper assured me, her voice strong with support. You deserve happiness. When I hung up, a mix of fear and determination settled inside me. The thought of taking that step terrified me, but for the first time in a long while, I felt empowered. I knew I had to reclaim my life, and that meant making decisions I never thought I'd have to make. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart but a clearer mind. The path ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine to walk. I picked up the phone and called the divorce attorney Juniper had recommended. Hello, my name is Serafina. I need to file for divorce, I said as soon as the call connected. Understood. Can you come in this afternoon to discuss the details? The attorney replied. Yes, I'll be there, I responded, hanging up with a sense of resolve. I was taking control one step at a time. At work, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but I felt the weight of the previous night's events pressing down on me. My boss, Mr. Jasperson, noticed my distraction during the morning meeting. Serafina, is everything all right? You seem a bit off today, he asked gently. I'm dealing with some personal issues, but I'll manage, I replied, forcing a smile. You know you can talk to me if you need to, he offered, his tone warm and understanding. Thank you, Mr. Jasperson. I appreciate it, I said, feeling grateful for his support. It was comforting to know I had allies at work. Later that day, Juniper surprised me with lunch. I thought you could use a break, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. How did the meeting with the attorney go? I haven't gone yet, I admitted. I'm nervous about what's next. Just take it one day at a time. You're stronger than you think, Serafina, she encouraged. Her words sparked a tiny flame of hope. As the afternoon wore on, I lost myself in my work, trying to escape the emotional turmoil churning inside. I focused on numbers, spreadsheets, and analysis, anything to keep my mind occupied. Finally, it was time for my appointment with the attorney. I took a deep breath before stepping into the office, my heart pounding. The attorney, a poised, middle-aged woman named Meredith, greeted me with a warm smile. Let's get started, Meredith said, her tone professional yet empathetic. Tell me what's been going on. I poured out my story, detailing the emotional and mental struggles I had faced. As I spoke, a sense of empowerment grew within me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking action. Serafina, it sounds like you've made the right choice for yourself. You deserve to be in a healthy, supportive environment, Meredith said, her words resonating deeply. After our meeting, I walked out of the office with a mix of anxiety and exhilaration, a cocktail of emotions that told me I had just taken a monumental step. I had begun reclaiming my life. The road ahead would be difficult, full of obstacles and unknowns, but I was ready to face it. I wasn't going to let someone else's expectations define me any longer. I would find my voice. I would discover my strength, and I would claim my freedom. The weeks that followed that anniversary dinner felt like a blur of emotions and relentless decisions. After my first meeting with Meredith, my divorce attorney, the reality of what lay ahead sank in. I was starting the excruciating process of disentangling my life from Jasper's. Every day was a tug of war between dread and hope, a constant battle between my fears and the fierce determination to reclaim my identity. At work, I threw myself into my projects, motivated by my recent promotion. It was more than just proving myself to others, it was about proving it to myself. Mr. Jasperson continued to check in on me, his concern unwavering. Serafina, you're doing exceptional work. If you ever need to talk, I'm here, he said one afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Jasperson. I truly appreciate your support, I replied, sincerity lacing my words. One evening, Juniper texted me, Let's celebrate your new beginning. Drinks this weekend? Her message brought a smile to my face. I needed an escape, a chance to feel like myself again. Absolutely. I could use some fun, I texted back, excitement bubbling inside me. That Saturday, we met at a lively bar downtown. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, and as I stepped inside, I felt an instant rush of energy. Juniper waved from a corner table, and I joined her, feeling the weight of the past few weeks begin to lift. Cheers to new beginnings, Juniper exclaimed, her glass raised high. To new beginnings, I echoed, our glasses clinking together with a satisfying sound. We spent the night chatting about work, my promotion, and the future. I shared my plan to start a mentorship program for young women in finance. I want to help them navigate the challenges I faced, I confided. That's a brilliant idea. You'd be an amazing mentor, Juniper said, her encouragement wrapping around me like a warm blanket. As the evening wore on, I felt lighter, more like myself again. I was rediscovering my passions, reconnecting with dreams I had almost forgotten. The laughter, the camaraderie with Juniper, it was everything I needed to reignite my spirit. The following week, I met Rachel, an industry contact who had invited me to speak at an upcoming conference. I'm so glad you decided to join us, Serafina. Your story can inspire so many, Rachel said as we settled into a cozy cafe. I hope so, I replied, my voice steady with newfound determination. I want to empower others to find their voices. As the conference date approached, I meticulously prepared my speech, weaving in the lessons I had learned. The night before, I practiced in front of the mirror, a blend of nerves and excitement swirling within me. On the day of the conference, as I stood backstage waiting for my turn, I took a deep breath, reminding myself of how far I had come. When the host introduced me, I stepped onto the stage, greeted by a round of applause from the packed auditorium. Thank you for having me, I began, scanning the sea of faces. I stand here today not as a victim, but as someone who chose to reclaim her life and use her experience to empower others. My journey wasn't easy, but it taught me that our voices matter. We deserve to be heard, to be seen, and to chase our dreams unapologetically. I shared my story, the highs and lows, the pain and the victories. As I spoke, I felt a sense of purpose infuse every word. By the time I finished, the audience was on their feet, the applause echoing through the hall. Women approached me afterward, sharing their stories and thanking me for my honesty. I realized then that my pain had transformed into a source of strength, not just for myself, but for others as well. In the days following the event, I received messages from women across the country who had been moved by my speech. They wanted to join my mentorship program to learn how to navigate the professional world with confidence and resilience. My small initiative had blossomed into something much larger than I had ever anticipated. Even though I was thriving, Jasper's shadows still loomed. Occasionally, I'd see his name pop up in emails or hear through mutual friends that he was struggling to move on, but I remained steadfast. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to look back. One evening, as I sat in my cozy apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, a sense of peace washed over me. I was no longer defined by the hurt Jasper had caused. I had created something meaningful, not just for myself, but for others too. My life had purpose again, and I had found my voice. Months passed, and one day, I received an unexpected nomination. My program had been nominated for a prestigious award recognizing contributions to gender equality in the workplace. I was stunned, overwhelmed by the honor, and humbled beyond words. When the night of the award ceremony arrived, I found myself surrounded by colleagues and friends who had been my support system, including Juniper, who had stood by me through everything. The host called my name, and as I made my way to the stage, the applause enveloped me like a wave. I'm honored to receive this award, I said, gripping the microphone. But this isn't just my achievement. It's the achievement of every woman who has ever been told her dreams don't matter, that her voice doesn't count. We all deserve to be heard, and we all deserve to succeed. Tears blurred my vision as I spoke. This moment meant more than I could have ever imagined. I wasn't just Serafina anymore, the woman who had struggled to find her place. I was Serafina, a mentor, an advocate, a beacon of hope for those still searching for theirs. As I stepped off the stage, Juniper wrapped me in a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We did it," I corrected, smiling through my happy tears. "I couldn't have done this without you." In the months that followed, my life continued to unfold in ways I hadn't imagined. The mentorship program expanded, reaching more young women eager to learn and grow. I traveled to cities, sharing my story, connecting with others who had faced similar struggles, and helping them realize they weren't alone. One day, after finishing a workshop in New York, I received an unexpected call. A major publishing company was interested in turning my story into a book. They believed my journey could inspire countless others, and they wanted to share it with a broader audience. I was speechless. Writing a book had never crossed my mind, but this opportunity felt like the culmination of everything I had worked toward. I agreed, and soon I found myself poring over my experiences, each chapter a testament to resilience and growth. When the book was published, the response was overwhelming. Readers from around the world reached out, sharing how my story had given them hope and courage. That moment made me realize that I had turned a painful chapter of my life into something truly positive. The book's success opened new doors for me. I was invited to speak on television, attend major events, and consult with companies on how to create more inclusive work environments. My life, once broken and uncertain, had transformed into a journey of purpose, strength, and empowerment. Years passed, and one sunny afternoon, I stood in front of a room filled with eager young women at a mentorship event. As I looked at their faces, it hit me. I had come so far. The woman who had once been humiliated, cast aside, was now a symbol of resilience. I had reclaimed my life, rediscovered my voice, and in the process had become a guiding light for others. Looking out at the sea of faces, pride and gratitude swelled in my chest. "Remember," I said, my voice strong and unwavering, "your story is yours to write. Don't let anyone take that from you. Chase your dreams, speak your truth, and never settle for anything less than what you deserve." The room erupted in applause, and as I stood there, I knew this was just the beginning. My story wasn't just about overcoming a toxic relationship. It was about rediscovering who I was and using that strength to build something beautiful. I stood there, surrounded by hope, and felt a deep sense of peace. The future was wide open, and I was ready to embrace every challenge and triumph that lay ahead. What do you do when the person you love turns on you, shattering everything you believed about your marriage? When your biggest achievement is met with rage instead of celebration, and your world is suddenly turned upside down by betrayal? Serafina's moment of triumph, her long-awaited promotion, was supposed to be a victory. But instead, it became the catalyst for everything she feared. The humiliation she endured that night wasn't just a shattered cake. It was the destruction of her trust, her love, and her identity within a marriage she thought was solid. The anger, the betrayal, the coldness, it was all too much. But Serafina refused to let it define her. With one phone call to her friend Juniper, everything began to change. She took the first step toward reclaiming her life, and every moment since has been about rebuilding herself, about rising from the ashes of her broken marriage and finding a new sense of purpose. Serafina's journey wasn't easy. It was filled with uncertainty, pain, and moments of doubt. But through her determination, she turned her pain into power, becoming a beacon of strength for other women who had faced similar struggles. Her story transformed, and now she's an inspiration, a mentor, a speaker, an author, living proof that no matter what life throws at you, you can always rebuild and reclaim your power. So what would you do if you found yourself in Serafina's shoes? Would you stay, try to make it work? Or would you find the strength to walk away and create a life that truly reflects your worth? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you found inspiration in this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more empowering stories like Serafina's.
The day the tornado hit, I was at work, my mind buried in mundane tasks, unaware of the chaos brewing at home. It was a typical spring day in our small town, the kind where the weather can't decide between sunshine and storms. When my phone rang, displaying my neighbor's number, I felt a spike of unease. "Emily, you need to come home now," her voice trembled. "It's your house, the tornado." My heart sank. I rushed through the emptying streets, the sky a menacing shade of gray. Turning onto our street was like entering a nightmare. Trees uprooted, power lines down, our neighborhood looked like a war zone. And there, standing defiant yet wounded, was our home. The sight of it brought a lump to my throat. Windows shattered, the roof partially torn off, our beloved home was a shell of its former self. But it was still standing. That was something. Thankfully, no one was home when the tornado struck. My husband, Mark, and our 2 kids were safe, which was all that truly mattered. But as we stood there, surveying the damage, I felt a sense of loss for the life we had built within those walls. We spent the next few hours salvaging what we could. Our neighbors, true to the spirit of our tight-knit community, rallied around us, offering help and support. In the midst of this chaos, there was a sense of unity, a shared resolve to rebuild not just our home, but our lives. That evening, we found temporary refuge at my sister's house. Exhausted, I finally had a moment to sit down and check my phone. It buzzed relentlessly with messages and missed calls. As I scrolled through, one particular notification caught my eye. It was a Facebook post from my mother-in-law, Linda. The post was dramatic, to say the least, claiming our house was completely destroyed. I felt a surge of irritation. Linda had a penchant for exaggeration, especially on social media, but this was a new low, even for her. Can you believe this? I showed the post to Mark, who let out a weary sigh. She just doesn't get it, he said, his voice a mix of anger and resignation. She knows I hate it when she posts about our personal life. The post had already gathered a string of comments, people expressing shock and sorrow, offering prayers and help. It was a kind gesture from the community, but based on false pretenses. I wanted to correct the post to set the record straight, but Mark placed a hand on my shoulder. Let's just deal with it tomorrow, he said. We've got enough on our plate right now. He was right, of course. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake off a growing sense of anger. Linda's actions, though perhaps well-intentioned, had crossed a line, and I was determined to make her understand that. The morning light did little to ease the heaviness in my heart. As I scrolled through the endless messages on my phone, Linda's post from last night glared back at me, a stark reminder of the unwanted drama unfolding alongside our real crisis. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I pondered my next move. Mark, ever the peacemaker, suggested letting it go, focusing on our immediate needs instead. But the more I thought about it, the more Linda's actions bothered me. It wasn't just about the post. It was about respect, privacy, and understanding boundaries. I decided to call Linda, hoping a direct conversation might resolve the issue. The phone rang, and after a couple of tones, her cheerful voice filled the line. Emily, darling, how are you holding up? I've been so worried. Linda, we need to talk about your Facebook post, I said, cutting to the chase. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, that, she replied, her tone shifting. I was just trying to let our friends and family know what happened. Gather some support for you all. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. Linda, our house wasn't destroyed. It's badly damaged, yes, but your post is misleading. And Mark specifically dislikes personal matters being shared on social media. There was another pause, longer this time. Well, I didn't mean any harm, she said defensively. I just wanted to help. I softened my tone. I appreciate that, Linda, but this isn't the way. Can you please correct the post? People are worried unnecessarily. There was a reluctant murmur of agreement from her before we ended the call. I felt a small victory, but the irritation lingered. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Linda's actions were more about garnering attention for herself than genuinely helping us. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and arrangements, insurance agents, contractors, family members offering help. In the midst of it all, I kept thinking about Linda and the impact of her thoughtlessness. It was a small part of a much larger problem, but it felt symbolic of the lack of understanding and respect that had always tinged our relationship. That evening, as we gathered at my sister's house for a makeshift dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to the Facebook fiasco. My sister, always the outspoken one, didn't mince words. You should give her a taste of her own medicine, she said, half joking. See how she likes it when her personal business is all over the internet. Her words, meant in jest, sparked an idea in my mind. A plan began to form, one that would teach Linda a lesson in a way she wouldn't expect. It was risky, potentially petty, but at that moment, it felt like the perfect response to an ongoing problem. The next day dawned with a sense of purpose for me. As I surveyed the damage to our home once more, I couldn't help but think about the unnecessary chaos Linda's post had caused. The more I reflected on it, the more it felt like a symptom of a much larger issue in our relationship with her. She often overstepped boundaries without considering the consequences, and this time I was determined to make her realize the impact of her actions. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Linda's exaggerated post continued. Mark's aunt, who had taken the post at face value, had shared her own version of the story, further distorting the truth. This led to a cascade of concerned calls and messages, adding to our already overwhelming situation. Mark, seeing the stress it was causing, finally agreed that something needed to be done. "I just don't understand why she always has to make things about her," he said, frustration evident in his voice. As we sat in the living room of my sister's house, surrounded by a few salvaged belongings, the reality of our situation hit me. We were in the middle of a crisis, yet part of our energy was being drained by a needless social media drama. That evening, I started to put my plan into action. It was simple, yet effective. I would give Linda a taste of her own medicine by sharing a post about her on Facebook. But not just any post. It would be a carefully crafted story, exaggerated just enough to make a point, yet harmless enough not to cause real damage. I spent some time composing the post, ensuring it was just right. "Feeling grateful for Linda," I began, "who bravely saved a stray cat during the storm and is now nursing it back to health at home." It was a complete fabrication, of course, but plausible enough to be believed. I hesitated for a moment before hitting post. This was not my usual style, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I thought about the stress her post had caused us, and with a mix of apprehension and determination, I shared the story. Within minutes, the post started to gain traction. Comments poured in, praising Linda's heroism and kindness. I watched as the notifications flooded in, a part of me feeling guilty for stooping to her level, yet another part feeling a sense of vindication. The following day, Linda called, flustered and overwhelmed by the attention the post had garnered. "Emily, I don't know what to do. Everyone is asking about this cat, and I don't even have one." I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's overwhelming when people share things about you on social media, isn't it?" There was a long pause on the other end. I see your point," she finally said, her voice a mixture of embarrassment and realization. It was a small victory, but an important one. Linda had finally experienced firsthand the impact of her actions. It was a lesson in empathy, delivered through the very medium she couldn't resist. The aftermath of my Facebook post was immediate and revealing. The phone call with Linda had ended on an awkward note, but it sparked a necessary conversation. Later that day, she came over to my sister's house, a rare gesture of humility in her eyes. "I didn't realize how my actions affected you and Mark," Linda began, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a hint of vulnerability. "I never intended to cause you more stress." I appreciated her effort to understand, but years of accumulated frustration bubbled to the surface. "Linda, it's not just about the post. It's about respecting our privacy. Mark has told you many times he doesn't like personal things shared on social media." Linda nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I guess I got carried away with wanting to be a part of everything. I didn't think about the consequences." The conversation that followed was long overdue. We talked about boundaries, respect, and the importance of communication. For the first time, I felt like Linda was truly listening, not just hearing what she wanted to. Mark joined us, and together, we began to untangle the complicated web of our family dynamics. It was a difficult conversation, filled with moments of tension and relief, but it was necessary, a step towards understanding and healing. As Linda left, she turned to me. "Thank you for the eye-opener, Emily. I promise to be more thoughtful in the future." The confrontation had been cathartic, but it left me with mixed feelings. My plan had worked, but I couldn't shake off the guilt of using deception, even if it was for a good cause. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We began the arduous process of repairing our home, buoyed by the support of our community. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. In the midst of the chaos, I often found myself reflecting on the confrontation with Linda. It had been a turning point, not just in our relationship with her, but in how I viewed conflicts and resolutions. I realized that sometimes it takes a drastic measure to bring about change, but the real challenge lies in handling the consequences with grace and understanding. As we slowly put our home and lives back together, I felt a newfound sense of resilience. The tornado had taken much from us, but it had also given us something unexpected, a chance to rebuild, not just our house, but our relationships and ourselves. In the days following the confrontation with Linda, there was a palpable shift in our family dynamics. The air was clearer, albeit still tinged with the remnants of past grievances. Linda's visits became more considerate, and our conversations more meaningful. Yet a part of me remained wary, unconvinced that old habits could change so quickly. As we navigated through the complexities of rebuilding our home, I found myself mulling over the effectiveness of my little plot. It was a tactic I was not proud of, but it had sparked a necessary change. This realization led me to reflect on the concept of revenge. Was it always a negative impulse, or could it, in some contexts, be a catalyst for positive change? I discussed these thoughts with Mark one evening as we sat amidst boxes of salvaged belongings at my sister's house. I keep thinking about what I did with that Facebook post, I admitted. Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels like it was the only way to get through to your mom. Mark took my hand, his eyes understanding. I know it wasn't easy for you, but it did make a difference. Sometimes we need to shake things up to make people see things differently. Encouraged by his words, I started to view my actions in a different light. Revenge, in its many forms, is often seen as a petty or destructive force. But in this case, it had served as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of one's actions back at them. This perspective became a source of strength for me. As we worked through the endless tasks of restoration and dealing with insurance claims, I found a newfound assertiveness. I was no longer hesitant to speak my mind, especially when it came to decisions about our home and family. Linda, for her part, seemed to have taken the lesson to heart. Her interactions with us became more thoughtful, and she was noticeably more restrained on social media. It was a small, yet significant change, one that improved the overall atmosphere whenever we gathered as a family. During this period, I also learned the importance of forgiveness. Holding on to anger and resentment was like carrying a heavy burden, that one that I no longer wished to bear. Forgiving Linda did not mean forgetting what had happened, but it allowed me to move forward without the weight of past conflicts. As our home slowly came back to life, so did our spirits. The process of rebuilding was not just about repairing walls and roofs, but about mending relationships and redefining boundaries. The storm had brought destruction, but in its wake it left room for growth and renewal. The reconstruction of our home progressed steadily, a tangible symbol of our family's resilience. With each repaired wall and repainted room, I felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. This period of rebuilding was not just physical, it was emotional and relational as well. My plan, which had initially been born out of frustration and a desire for revenge, had unexpectedly opened a path to healing and understanding. Linda's transformation, though gradual, was evident. She became more mindful of her words and actions, showing a level of consideration that was previously absent. One weekend, as we were unpacking some boxes in the newly restored living room, Linda dropped by, unannounced yet welcome. She came bearing a homemade cake, a small but significant gesture. We sat around the kitchen table, savoring the cake and the comfort of easy conversation. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Linda began, her tone reflective. "I realize now how much I've overstepped in the past. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you both." Her apology was sincere, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was the closure I hadn't realized I needed. "Thank you, Linda," I said, meaning every word. "It means a lot to us." As we talked, I saw a new side of Linda. She listened more than she spoke, her responses thoughtful and considerate. It was a stark contrast to the Linda I had known, the one who always seemed to be at the center of every conversation. This change in Linda had a ripple effect on our family dynamics. Mark and I found ourselves looking forward to her visits, appreciating her efforts to be a better mother and mother-in-law. Our conversations delved deeper, moving beyond surface-level pleasantries to genuine discussions about life, dreams, and fears. In these moments, I realized the power of communication and empathy. My initial plan, conceived in a moment of frustration, had unknowingly paved the way for a deeper connection. It was a reminder that sometimes the most challenging situations can lead to the most profound transformations. As our home neared completion, so did our journey of reconciliation and understanding. The experience had taught us the value of patience, forgiveness, and the strength of family bonds. We had weathered the storm, both literal and metaphorical, emerging stronger and more united. With our home fully restored and our family relationships on a new, healthier trajectory, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had undergone. The once damaged walls of our home now stood strong and vibrant, echoing the transformation within our family. Linda's evolution was the most remarkable. The once overbearing and intrusive mother-in-law had become a thoughtful and considerate part of our lives. Her change was not just in her actions, but in her understanding of us as a family. She respected our boundaries and became an integral, positive force in our lives. This transformation was not lost on our extended family and friends. They noticed the change in dynamics, often commenting on the newfound harmony at family gatherings. It was a testament to the power of communication and the willingness to change. As for me, the entire ordeal had been a profound learning experience. I had confronted a challenging situation with a plan that, in retrospect, was risky and could have backfired. But it had led to a positive outcome, teaching me the importance of standing up for what I believed was right, albeit in a non-conventional way. I shared these reflections with Mark one evening as we sat in our rejuvenated living room. I never thought that a plan born out of frustration would lead to such a positive change, I mused. Mark smiled, taking my hand. Sometimes it's the unexpected paths that lead us to the best destinations. I'm just glad we've come out of this stronger as a family. The incident with the tornado and the subsequent fallout with Linda had brought us closer together. It had shown us the strength of our bond, the resilience of our family, and the transformative power of empathy and understanding. Our home, once a symbol of loss and chaos, had become a haven of love and unity. It stood as a reminder that out of destruction can come growth, and out of conflict can come harmony. We had not only rebuilt our home, but had also restructured our family dynamics into something stronger and more meaningful. As I looked around at the walls that had witnessed so much, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and in its wake, we found a deeper appreciation for each other and the home we shared. As his mother's icy words pierced the Christmas air, "Blood is thicker than water, dear. You'll understand one day. I realized this wasn't just coldness, it was cruelty." But the day she sneered, "Planning to go to college? How ambitious for someone like you," I knew it was war. I remember the first time I saw him just as clearly as I remember the first time I met her, his mother. We were both 13, awkward in our own ways, but there was something about him that drew me in. It wasn't just a teenage crush, it felt like something more, something deeper. And as our relationship grew, so did my encounters with his family, particularly with his mother. My initial interactions with her were cordial, albeit somewhat cold. I was young, naive, and eager to be accepted. I remember how she would subtly direct me out of family photos during Christmas, saying things like, "Oh dear, this is just for immediate family. Maybe you could help with setting the table." I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe this was just how families were, having grown up in a less formal environment myself. But as time went on, these small acts of exclusion became more frequent. I would be gently ushered away under some pretense or another when it came to family games or discussions. "Why don't you take a break, dear? We're just having a little family catch-up," she would say, her tone polite yet firm. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive, reading too much into harmless comments. But the pattern was undeniable. It wasn't just about being left out of pictures or games. It was the way she would talk about their family, her family, emphasizing the word as if to remind me that I was not a part of it. Her remarks were never overtly hostile, always wrapped in a veneer of politeness. Yet, the message was clear. I was an outsider. I tried to talk to my boyfriend about it, but he always brushed it off. "That's just how she is," he would say. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her behavior. It was as if she saw me as a threat, an unwelcome intruder in her carefully curated family life. What made it all the more confusing was her reputation within the family. She had fought with nearly every relative on her husband's side, cutting ties and burning bridges with a startling ease. I often wondered what had caused such rifts, what words had been said to create such chasms. But I never dared to ask. It was a strange situation to be in, feeling both a part of something special with my boyfriend and yet so distinctly apart from a key aspect of his life. As we grew older, our relationship strengthening with each passing year, the divide between me and his family, or rather his mother, only seemed to widen. But I held on to the hope that one day things would change, that I would be seen as more than just an outsider looking in. The chill of the winter air was nothing compared to the coldness I felt in her living room. Christmas was around the corner, and the house was draped in festive lights, the tree twinkling in the corner. Yet, the warmth of the season seemed to bypass her heart. "You know, dear, it's always nice to see young love. But remember, things change," she said one evening, her voice laced with a deceptive sweetness as she handed me a cup of hot cocoa. The words hung in the air, a veiled warning wrapped in a grandmotherly tone. I remember looking over at my boyfriend, seeking reassurance. But he was engrossed in conversation with his father, laughing at some joke. I felt a pang of isolation, a silent scream in a room full of voices. "Change can be good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It brings new opportunities." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed it does. But family always remains. Blood is thicker than water, after all." The way she stressed family made my stomach knot. It was a barrier, a line drawn in the sand that I couldn't cross. Days turned into months, and every family gathering felt like navigating a minefield. The subtle jabs continued, each one a reminder of my outsider's status. "Would you mind helping with the dishes, dear? We're just going to have some family time," she'd say, her words a velvet knife. I would retreat to the kitchen, the sound of their laughter a distant echo, and I'd wonder what I was doing wrong. Why couldn't I be a part of that laughter? Was it so hard for her to accept me? My boyfriend's obliviousness to the situation only added to the weight of my solitude. I loved him, but in moments like these, I felt miles apart from him. It was as if he lived in a different reality, one where his mother's barbs were just harmless comments. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, she turned to me with a calculated casualness. "So have you thought about what you'll do after high school? It's important to have a plan, especially when you're, well, not from a well-off family." I felt my cheeks burn, the sting of her words sharper than any physical blow. "I have," I replied, trying to mask my hurt. "I'm planning to go to college. I want to study psychology." "Psychology?" She raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice for someone who struggles to understand basic family dynamics. My fork clattered against my plate. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no mistaking the message now. She didn't see me as worthy, not of her family, and certainly not of her son. It was in that moment, under the harsh glare of the dining room light, that I realized this was more than just a series of misunderstandings. This was a deliberate campaign to undermine me, to make me feel small and unwelcome. And for the first time, I began to question whether I could ever truly be a part of the family I so desperately wanted to belong to. The tension in the air was palpable as the holiday season approached. Christmas, a time for joy and family, had become a battleground of unspoken words and hidden resentments. My boyfriend and I were caught in a delicate balancing act, trying to divide our time between my family and his. But this year the scales tipped dangerously. "I think we should spend Christmas morning with my family and then the afternoon and evening with yours," my boyfriend suggested, his voice hesitant, as if walking on thin ice. I nodded, appreciating his attempt at fairness, but dreading the inevitable reaction from his mother. Sounds like a plan, but let's brace ourselves for the storm. The storm came, as expected, but not in the form I anticipated. It was a cold front from his mother, a series of messages oscillating between guilt-tripping and outright anger. She couldn't fathom why we would choose to spend more time with my family, implying a lack of loyalty on our part. In an attempt to smooth things over, I sent her a text, explaining our decision and expressing my desire to still celebrate with them. "We really want to spend a full day celebrating Christmas with you, playing cards and enjoying the lights," I wrote, hoping to bridge the gap. Her response was a thunderclap. "So, now you dictate how my son spends his holidays? You're pulling him away from us? You've always been manipulative, even as a teenager." I stared at the phone, my heart sinking. Words like manipulative and narcissist were thrown around, painting me as some villain in their family story. I was overseas at the time, hoping for a respite, but the conflict followed me like a shadow. My boyfriend stood by me, his own disbelief and anger growing with each accusatory message from his parents. They came to our house, uninvited, a confrontation that ended with him defending me and our relationship and demanding they leave. "I can't believe they called you abusive and narcissistic," he said later, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. "They've crossed a line, and I don't know if we can come back from this." His words echoed in my mind as I returned home, hoping for some resolution. But the divide had only deepened. They called him, backpedaling on their accusations, but the damage was done. They nitpicked my every action, every word, turning mundane gestures into evidence of my supposed manipulative nature. As I listened to their baseless claims, a realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about Christmas or family time. This was a concerted effort to undermine me, to paint me as the villain in their son's life. And as the accusations piled up, so did my resolve. My boyfriend and I made a decision, one that was heartbreaking but necessary. We decided they would not be invited to our wedding. It was a line drawn in the sand, a stand against the relentless tide of their unwarranted hostility. But even as we made this decision, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss. A part of me had always hoped for reconciliation, for a family united. But as the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in white, I realized some divides were too wide to bridge, and perhaps some ties were meant to be broken. The flight back home felt longer than usual, each mile stretching out endlessly. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, replaying the recent events that had turned our lives upside down. I had hoped my trip overseas would offer a break from the tension, but instead, it felt like I was returning to a battlefield. When I walked into our house, the familiar walls seemed to echo with the remnants of the argument that had taken place in my absence. My boyfriend greeted me with a tight hug, a silent acknowledgement of the storm we were weathering together. He recounted the details of his parents' unexpected visit, how they had come with accusations and left with anger. His voice trembled with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "They said you were controlling me, that our relationship is abusive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had to ask them to leave. I couldn't stand hearing them talk about you like that." I sat there, numb, trying to process his words. It was one thing to be on the receiving end of passive-aggressive comments, but to be accused of being an abuser was something entirely different. It felt surreal, like a twisted narrative from a different life. In the days that followed, our home became a refuge and a prison. We were safe from their accusations, but we couldn't escape the reality of the situation. The rift between my boyfriend and his parents had grown into a chasm, and I couldn't help but feel responsible. We spent evenings talking, sometimes in circles, about what to do next. "Maybe we should just elope," he suggested one night, half joking, half serious. "At least then we wouldn't have to worry about who to invite." I laughed, but the idea lingered in my mind, a tempting escape from the drama. Yet deep down, I knew running away wasn't the solution. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about standing our ground, about not letting their baseless accusations define us. The calls from his parents continued, a mix of backtracking and new accusations. They seemed to be grasping at straws, trying to find any reason to validate their disdain for me. "They said you don't say please or thank you enough," my boyfriend told me, his voice tinged with exasperation. "And now they're claiming you never greet them properly. It's like they're creating a version of you that doesn't even exist." I listened, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. The allegations were so petty, so far from the truth, that it was almost laughable. Almost. But beneath the absurdity was a painful realization. They were trying to erase the person I was, replacing me with a caricature of their own making. As the days turned into weeks, the initial shock of their words gave way to a deep-seated determination. I refused to let their perception of me become my reality. I had spent too long trying to win their approval, to fit into their narrow definition of family, but no more. It was time to define myself, to stand firm in who I was and who I wanted to be. The The decision not to invite them to our wedding solidified in my heart. It wasn't just about drawing a line. It was about choosing ourselves, our love, over the toxic dynamics of his family. It was a choice made with a heavy heart, but with a clear vision of the future we wanted to build, one based on respect, understanding, and unconditional love. As the winter turned to spring, I watched the world come back to life, the snow melting away to reveal the resilient earth beneath. And in that renewal, I found a reflection of our own journey, a testament to the strength that comes from facing adversity together. Returning to a semblance of normal life after such turmoil was like trying to piece together a shattered vase. We knew it would never be the same, but we hoped to find some beauty in the imperfection, in the new shape our lives were taking. As I sat across from my boyfriend one evening, the low hum of the city outside our window, I couldn't help but feel the weight of his parents' accusations lingering between us. "Do you think there's any truth to what they said? About me being manipulative?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "No, absolutely not. They don't see the amazing person I see. They don't know you like I do." His words were a balm, but the scars were still tender. I found myself replaying every interaction with his parents, analyzing my words, my actions, searching for any hint of the person they accused me of being. It was exhausting, like chasing shadows in a never-ending maze. Their recent call, an attempt to retract their earlier allegations while still hurling new ones, only added to the confusion. The claims were petty, almost laughable in their triviality, but their impact was profound. They accused me of not saying please or thank you enough, of failing to greet them properly, a litany of manners they claimed I lacked. I found myself laughing one moment and crying the next. How can they even say these things? After everything, they focus on pleasantries, I said, my laughter tinged with disbelief. "It's their way of trying to control the narrative," my boyfriend replied, his voice steady but his eyes revealing the turmoil within. "They're trying to paint you in a certain light to justify their behavior." The conversation shifted to our upcoming wedding, a topic that once brought joy but now was shadowed by the absence of his parents. "Are we doing the right thing?" I asked, the doubt creeping in. "We are," he affirmed, his grip on my hand tightening. "This is about us, our love, our future, not their prejudices." In the weeks that followed, we focused on planning our wedding, a celebration of our journey and the life we were building together. It was a bittersweet process, the joy of planning our special day mixed with the sorrow of his parents' absence. But as the wedding day approached, I found strength in the love that surrounded us. Friends, my family, and most importantly, my partner. Their support was a reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who see you for who you truly are. On the eve of our wedding, as I stood looking out at the city, the lights twinkling like distant stars, I realized that this was a new beginning, a chance to leave behind the hurt and the accusations, to step into a future filled with love and understanding. Our decision to exclude his parents from the wedding wasn't just about drawing a boundary. It was about choosing happiness over toxicity, peace over conflict. It was a declaration that we would not let their narrow-minded views dictate the course of our lives. As I turned away from the window, ready to embrace the future, I knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, but I also knew that together we were strong enough to face whatever came our way, bound not by the approval of others, but by the love we shared, a love that was our own, unbreakable, and true. On the morning of our wedding, I awoke with a mix of emotions swirling within me. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, yet there was a shadow cast by the absence of his parents. As I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led us here. The house was quiet, the calm before the storm of celebration. In this rare moment of solitude, my thoughts drifted to his parents. There was a part of me, a small, hopeful part, that had wished for reconciliation, for a miracle that would mend the broken ties. But as the light of dawn grew stronger, so did my realization that some things were beyond repair. I thought about the accusations, the hurtful words, the relentless attempts to paint me as someone I wasn't. It had been a battle, not just against their perceptions, but against my own doubts. Their words had planted seeds of uncertainty in my mind, making me question my worth, my place in his life. But as I sat there, on the brink of a new chapter, I realized that their words had also given me something invaluable: resilience. I had learned to stand up for myself, to trust in the love and support of those who truly knew me. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had, forged in the fire of their unwarranted judgment. I stood up, my reflection in the mirror a testament to the journey. Today I was not just a bride. I was a survivor, a warrior who had fought for her place in the world. The day unfolded in a blur of laughter, tears, and endless dancing. Our friends and family surrounded us, their love and joy palpable in every hug, every congratulatory smile. My parents beamed with pride, their eyes shining with unshed tears as they watched us exchange vows. And there he was, my partner, my rock, standing before me with a look of love so deep, so unwavering that it took my breath away. As we said our vows, promising to love and cherish each other in sickness and in health, I knew that we were more than just husband and wife. We were partners in every sense of the word, bound by a love that had weathered the fiercest of storms. As the night drew to a close, we stood together, watching our guests depart. The air was filled with the echoes of laughter and music, the remnants of a day filled with love and celebration. "We did it," he whispered, his arms wrapped around me. "We really did it." "Yes, we did," I replied, my heart full, "and we'll keep doing it every day for the rest of our lives." We stood there, in each other's embrace, looking out at the starlit sky. It was a moment of peace, of contentment, a quiet end to a day that marked the beginning of our forever. As I lay in bed that night, his arms around me, I realized that this was what true love felt like. It wasn't just about the romantic gestures or the passionate declarations. It was about standing together in the face of adversity, about choosing each other over and over again, even when the world seemed to be against us. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought us to this moment, to a love that was stronger and more profound than I could have ever imagined. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, our love a beacon that would guide us through the darkest of times. My name is Emma, and if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be the black sheep of an upper-class family, I would have laughed. But here I am, married to the love of my life, Daniel, yet constantly battling the disapproval of my mother-in-law, Victoria. When Daniel and I first met, it was like stepping into a fairy tale. He was charming, kind, and utterly oblivious to the privileges his upper-class upbringing had afforded him. I, on the other hand, came from a middle-class family where every penny counted. Our backgrounds were worlds apart, but our love felt like the perfect bridge. Daniel's family was another story. They were welcoming at first, in a distant, polite kind of way. But Victoria, his mother, always had a measuring look in her eyes. She was the matriarch, a woman who carried her family's legacy like a crown and expected everyone to live up to her standards. I tried, God knows I tried. I attended every event, smiled through countless dinners, and even laughed at jokes I didn't understand. But it was never enough for Victoria. She saw me as an outsider, someone not fit to carry the family name. And the more I tried to prove myself, the wider the gap between us grew. The first real clash came with our wedding. Victoria wanted a spectacle, something that would make the social pages and impress their circle. She talked about 7-figure budgets, as if discussing the weather. But Daniel and I, we wanted something different. We wanted a celebration of love, not wealth. We organized a modest wedding, focusing on what mattered to us: good food, close friends, and family. It was a beautiful day, the kind you dream about, but Victoria couldn't hide her disdain. She complained about every detail, from the decorations to the menu, and even managed to convince some relatives that our wedding was a disappointment. Looking back, I realized that was the moment I lost any chance of winning her over. Not that I didn't try. I continued to play the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law, but Victoria's coldness turned into something more. It became a silent war, one where every gesture and word was scrutinized and judged. I remember once overhearing her talking to a friend, describing our wedding as charmingly simplistic, but lacking in any real taste. Her words stung, and I realized then that it wasn't just about class or money. It was about control. Victoria wanted to dictate every aspect of our lives, and my refusal to bend to her will was seen as a direct challenge. Daniel saw it too. He stood by me, always, which only worsened his relationship with his mother. It was as if she couldn't comprehend why her son would choose his wife over her archaic ideals of family and status. But I was tired of the constant judgment, the veiled insults, and the never-ending battle to prove myself worthy of a family that seemed determined to see me as an outsider. I started to withdraw, to build walls around myself for protection. And as the holiday season approached, I made a decision that would set the stage for an even greater conflict. One that would test not just my marriage, but my very sense of self. The stage was set for a showdown, and I, Emma, was at the heart of it. Little did I know, the coming events would reveal secrets and challenges that would change everything I thought I knew about family, love, and belonging. The battle lines were drawn unintentionally with our wedding, a day that was supposed to symbolize unity, but instead sowed deep-seated division. Daniel and I had envisioned a day filled with love and laughter, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us. We wanted it to be a celebration of us as a couple, a reflection of our journey together. Victoria, however, had other plans. She envisioned a grand affair, something that would be talked about in their social circles for years to come. Her idea of a wedding was less about the union of two hearts and more about showcasing wealth and status. When we told her we were planning a modest event, focusing on the quality of food and intimacy of the gathering, her disappointment was palpable. "You only get married once, Emma," she said in a tone that dripped with condescension. "Don't you want it to be memorable?" It was memorable, but not in the way Victoria had hoped. Our wedding was a joyous occasion filled with laughter, diverse cuisines that reflected our love for food, and heartfelt speeches. Even George, Daniel's father, who was known for his stoicism, let loose and enjoyed himself. But Victoria, clad in an expensive designer dress that overshadowed even the most elaborate decorations, wore a tight smile that never reached her eyes. The fallout from our wedding was immediate. Victoria's disappointment turned into a silent yet relentless campaign against me. She would make offhand comments about how things could have been better if only we had listened to her. I heard whispers, little snippets of conversations where she lamented to family members and friends about the missed opportunity our wedding was. Daniel tried to mediate, but there was a growing chasm between him and his mother. Each time he defended our choices, it only seemed to fuel Victoria's disapproval. He was torn, caught between the love for his mother and his loyalty to me. But the real conflict was not about the wedding. It was about control. Victoria had always been the one calling the shots in the family, and our wedding was the first time someone had dared to defy her. It was more than just a disagreement over a celebration. It was a challenge to the power dynamics within the family. I found myself questioning my place in this family. I had married into a world where appearances mattered more than authenticity, where tradition overshadowed individuality, and at the center of it all was Victoria, a matriarch who viewed my presence as a threat to the order she had meticulously maintained. As the months passed, the strain began to take its toll. Daniel and I were happy together, but the constant undercurrent of tension with Victoria cast a shadow over our marriage. It wasn't just about being accepted, it was about maintaining my identity in the face of overwhelming pressure to conform. The holiday season was approaching, a time for family and togetherness. But in my heart, I knew that being around Victoria would only deepen the divide. It was time to make a choice, one that would either bridge the gap or widen it irreparably. Little did I know that this decision would lead to a confrontation that would change everything. The holiday season, meant to be a time of joy and family, became a battleground in my ongoing war with Victoria. After the wedding fiasco, I realized that any hope of a peaceful relationship with her was wishful thinking. It was then that I decided to set firm boundaries, a decision that Daniel supported, albeit with a heavy heart. Victoria's influence in the family was undeniable. She was used to getting her way, and anyone who dared to defy her faced her wrath. However, I was determined not to let her control our lives. So, when the annual family vacation planning began, I made a stand. "I think it would be best for everyone if I didn't join this year," I told Daniel, who looked at me with a mixture of understanding and sadness. He knew how toxic the atmosphere had become, but the thought of being apart during the holidays was painful for him. Victoria's reaction to my decision was as expected. She took it as a personal affront, a deliberate act of defiance. Her demeanor towards me, already frosty, turned openly hostile. She accused me of driving a wedge in the family, of turning her son against her. The backlash was immediate and intense. Victoria's influence meant that other family members started to view me with suspicion and distrust. Whispered conversations would cease when I entered a room, and invitations to family events became less frequent. Despite the challenges, Daniel stood by me, his loyalty unwavering. This only seemed to infuriate Victoria more, and she began to question my intentions, suggesting that I was manipulating her son for my gain. Her accusations were baseless, but they hurt. I had entered this family with open arms, only to be met with closed doors. Our relationship reached a breaking point during a particularly tense family dinner. Victoria, in a moment of unbridled anger, openly criticized our marriage. Her words were sharp, each one a dagger aimed at my heart. "You've changed him," she hissed across the table. "My son was never like this before you came along. You've taken him away from us." Daniel, usually the peacemaker, finally snapped. "I'm still your son, but I'm also Emma's husband. She's my family too, and you need to respect that." The room fell silent. It was the first time Daniel had openly confronted his mother. The tension was palpable, a tangible entity that filled the space between us. That night, as Daniel and I lay in bed, a mix of emotions swirling within us, we realized that our struggle was more than just a series of disagreements. It was a fight for our identity as a couple, a battle against an oppressive tradition that sought to dictate our lives. As Christmas approached, the idea of spending it under Victoria's scrutinizing gaze was unbearable. I suggested to Daniel that he should go on the family vacation without me. I would stay back, find solace in the quiet of our home, and later join my own family for their post-Christmas celebration. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed, but his decision only fueled Victoria's narrative that I was the villain in this story. Her call the next day was a clear indication of her feelings. "You're tearing this family apart," she accused, her voice dripping with venom. "You've taken my son, and now you won't even let him spend Christmas with his own family." I listened, a sense of weariness washing over me. Her words, once sharp and hurtful, now seemed hollow. I was tired of the constant battle, tired of trying to prove myself to someone who had already made up her mind about me. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this was more than just a family feud. It was a test of my resilience, a challenge to my place in a world that seemed determined to reject me. But as the year drew to a close, I knew that the biggest battle was yet to come. The decision to spend Christmas apart from Daniel's family was one of the hardest I had ever made. As the festive season enveloped the city in its warm embrace, I found myself enveloped in a cold, unyielding solitude. Daniel, torn between his loyalty to me and his family obligations, was a picture of inner conflict. In the end, he chose to stay with me, a decision that only served to deepen Victoria's resentment. Christmas Eve arrived with a sense of emptiness. Daniel tried to keep a brave face, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. He missed his family, traditions they shared, and the laughter that echoed through their grand home. I felt a pang of guilt for being the cause of his sorrow, but I also knew that joining Victoria and the rest of the family would only lead to more pain. The day passed in a blur of artificial cheerfulness. We watched movies, cooked together, and tried to make the best of our situation. But the shadow of the unspoken conflict with Victoria loomed over us, an ever-present specter of discord. On Christmas morning, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace we had managed to build. It was Victoria, her voice icy and sharp. "You've really done it this time, Emma," she accused. "You've kept my son from his family on Christmas. Are you happy now?" Her words were like a slap in the face, but I had grown accustomed to her hostility. "Daniel made his own decision," I replied calmly, trying to keep my voice steady. The conversation that followed was a bitter exchange of accusations and grievances. Victoria blamed me for every rift in the family, for every moment of unhappiness Daniel had ever experienced. I listened, feeling a mix of anger and despair. After the call, Daniel and I sat in silence, the joy of the day overshadowed by the heavy weight of family conflict. It was clear that something had to change, but I was at a loss as to how to bridge the chasm that had formed between us and Victoria. The days that followed were a reflection of our inner turmoil. Daniel was distant, lost in his thoughts, and I was consumed by a sense of helplessness. The family vacation that I had opted out of became a symbol of my isolation, a stark reminder of the price of setting boundaries. As New Year's Eve approached, I made a decision. I would reach out to Victoria, try to mend fences, and start the new year on a new footing. It was a resolution born out of desperation, a last-ditch effort to salvage what was left of our family ties. But fate had other plans. A call came late on New Year's Eve, a call that would change everything. Victoria had been rushed to the hospital, a heart attack. In that moment, all our differences, all our conflicts, seemed trivial and inconsequential. Daniel and I rushed to the hospital, the urgency of the situation bringing a new perspective. As I sat in the sterile waiting room, watching Daniel pace back and forth, I realized how deeply entwined our lives had become with his family. For better or worse, Victoria's health scare was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. It forced us to reevaluate our priorities, to question the value of holding on to grudges and resentments. As Victoria recovered, there was a palpable shift in our dynamics. The brush with mortality had softened her, made her more reflective, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of hope, a possibility of reconciliation. But the journey to healing was far from over. The years of conflict had left deep scars, and it would take more than a health scare to erase them. As I looked ahead to the coming year, I knew that the road to forgiveness and understanding would be long and arduous. But for the sake of our family, for the sake of the love that Daniel and I shared, it was a road I was willing to travel. Victoria's health scare marked a turning point in our strained relationship. As she lay in the hospital, frail and vulnerable, I saw a different side of her, a side that was human, scared, and far from the controlling matriarch I had always known. It was a stark reminder that beneath the layers of pride and prejudice, we were all fragile beings, bound by the same fears and hopes. In the days following her hospitalization, there was an unspoken truce between us. The usual sharp remarks and cold stares were replaced by a cautious civility. Victoria, recovering slowly, seemed to have lost some of her combative spirit. Daniel, relieved by his mother's improving health, hoped this would be a new beginning for us all. But old wounds don't heal easily. The years of resentment and misunderstanding had built walls that were not easy to tear down. I found myself wrestling with mixed emotions, relief that Victoria was recovering, but also apprehension about what this meant for our future interactions. One afternoon, while visiting Victoria in the hospital, I found myself alone with her in the room. The silence was awkward, filled with unspoken words and unresolved tensions. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Emma, I know we've had our differences," she began hesitantly. "I haven't always been fair to you. This situation has made me realize that life is too short for such bitterness." Her admission took me by surprise. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from her. I sat there, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to embrace this opportunity for peace, to let go of the past and move forward. But another part, the part that had been hurt and belittled, clamored for retribution, for recognition of the pain she had caused. I looked at Victoria, her usual armor of confidence and control gone, replaced by a certain vulnerability. It was a moment of decision. Should I seek revenge for all the hurt or extend the olive branch of reconciliation? My mind raced with possibilities. I could use this opportunity to assert my place in the family, to turn the tables on Victoria and make her feel the isolation and judgment she had inflicted on me. But as I watched her, a frail figure amidst the sterile hospital sheets, I realized that such a path would only perpetuate the cycle of conflict and pain. I appreciate your words, Victoria," I finally said, my voice steady but gentle. "I hope we can put the past behind us and start anew." A flicker of relief passed through Victoria's eyes. "I would like that," she replied quietly. The days that followed were a tentative dance of reconciliation. We started to build bridges, slowly and carefully. There were moments of awkwardness, of old habits threatening to resurface, but there was also a newfound respect and understanding. Daniel was cautiously optimistic, happy to see the two most important women in his life trying to mend their relationship. And for me, it was a journey of letting go, of choosing peace over revenge, understanding over conflict. But the true test of our fragile truce came during the next family gathering. It was an opportunity to solidify our newfound understanding or to fall back into the old patterns of hostility and resentment. As the day approached, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation, wondering if the peace we had started to build was strong enough to withstand the pressures of family dynamics. What happened that day would either cement our journey towards healing or shatter the delicate peace we had managed to forge. The family gathering loomed like a final exam for which I had been preparing, yet still felt unready. The event, a grandiose annual soirée hosted by Victoria and George, was typically a showcase of status and superficial pleasantries. This year, however, it carried a new significance. It would be the first public appearance of our reconciled family unit. As Daniel and I arrived, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The opulent setting, a grand ballroom adorned with crystal chandeliers and silk drapes, seemed to echo with the memories of past confrontations. Guests mingled, glasses clinked, and the air was filled with the light hum of orchestrated socializing. Victoria, resplendent in a tasteful evening gown, greeted us at the entrance. Her smile, once a well-practiced facade, now held a hint of genuine warmth. The initial exchange was cautious but polite, a significant improvement from our previous encounters. The evening progressed with an unexpected ease. Conversations flowed more freely, and I found myself engaging with family members who had previously kept their distance. The atmosphere, although still charged with the undercurrents of a complex history, was noticeably less tense. Daniel, watching his family interact with a newfound harmony, seemed visibly relieved. His gaze met mine across the room, and in his eyes I saw gratitude and love. It was a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had undertaken, the challenges we had faced and overcome together. However, the true test came later in the evening. Victoria, in a move that surprised everyone, raised her glass for a toast. The room fell silent, all eyes turning towards her. "Tonight, I want to acknowledge someone who has shown great strength and grace," she began, her voice steady. "Emma, my daughter-in-law, has been a part of this family for years, and I have not always been as welcoming as I should have been." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Victoria continued, her eyes meeting mine. "Emma, you have brought much-needed change to this family. You have shown us that love and understanding are more important than tradition and appearances. I am grateful for the lessons you have taught me, and I look forward to the future we will build together as a family." The room erupted in applause, a sound that resonated with the beating of my heart. It was a moment of redemption, of wounds beginning to heal. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me, a mix of relief, happiness, and a newfound respect for Victoria. The rest of the evening was a celebration not just of the family's social status, but of its growth and unity. Laughter filled the air, replacing the stifling formality that had once dominated these events. As the night drew to a close, Daniel and I walked hand in hand, the stars shining brightly above us. The journey had been long and fraught with obstacles, but we had emerged stronger, both as individuals and as a couple. Our story was not just one of conflict and struggle, but of understanding and forgiveness. It was a testament to the power of love and resilience, a reminder that sometimes new beginnings can emerge from the bitter ends. The days following the family gathering were filled with a sense of quiet contentment, a stark contrast to the tumultuous years that had preceded. Daniel and I, once caught in the eye of a relentless storm, now found ourselves in a peaceful harbor. The change was not just in our relationship with Victoria, but within ourselves. As I reflected on the journey, I realized how much I had grown. The struggles with Victoria, though painful, had taught me the value of patience, resilience, and most importantly, the strength of my own convictions. I had learned to navigate the delicate balance between standing up for myself and extending grace to others. Daniel and I, through the fires of conflict, had forged a deeper bond. Our marriage, once tested by external pressures, was now a testament to our mutual respect and understanding. He had been my unwavering support, my partner in every sense, and together we had turned adversity into a stronger, more profound love. Victoria, too, had transformed. The formidable matriarch, once unyielding in her ways, had shown a capacity for change that I never thought possible. Her journey, from a figure of authority to one of understanding, was a powerful reminder that people could evolve, given time and empathy. Our family dynamic had shifted. The once rigid hierarchy dissolved into a more egalitarian structure, where each member's voice was heard and respected. The change was not overnight, nor was it without its setbacks, but it was a start, a foundation upon which we could build a more harmonious future. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. Daniel and I, once isolated in our struggles, now found ourselves part of a family that, while still imperfect, was learning to embrace its flaws and grow together. We hosted dinners, attended family events, and engaged in conversations that previously would have been unthinkable. The scars of the past remained, a reminder of the challenges we had faced, but they also served as a testament to our resilience. We had navigated the complexities of family dynamics, cultural differences, and personal battles to create a space where love and understanding could flourish. As I looked forward to the road ahead, I saw not a path free of obstacles, but one that we could navigate together as a family. The journey of reconciliation and growth would continue, with its highs and lows, but I was confident in our ability to face whatever came our way. Our story, woven through the threads of family drama and personal struggles, was a tapestry of life's complexities and beauties. It was a narrative of change, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. In the end, what mattered was not the conflicts we had faced, but the lessons we had learned and the bonds we had strengthened. Our story was a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, there is always a possibility for new beginnings, for healing, and for hope. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the baby monitor, ensuring every corner of the nursery was visible. It was the first time Jack and I were leaving our little Ethan alone since his birth 3 weeks ago. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Harper, had insisted we take a break, and reluctantly, I agreed. Before leaving, I carefully showed her Ethan's sleep sack, emphasizing how important it was not to use any blankets, especially near his face. "You're just being paranoid," she had chuckled, but I saw her nod, so I left, feeling a tad reassured. The cafe where Jack and I sat was cozy, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept glancing at my phone, the live feed from the baby monitor playing. Jack reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "He'll be fine," he assured me, but his words did little to soothe my anxiety. About an hour into our lunch, I noticed something on the monitor that made my heart skip a beat. Mrs. Harper was swaddling Ethan, not with the sleep sack, but with a blanket tightly wrapped around his hips. My instructions had been clear, and yet there she was doing the exact opposite. I felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "Jack, we need to go." "Now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We hurried back, finding Ethan asleep in his crib, the blanket still snug around him. Mrs. Harper greeted us with a smile, oblivious to my distress. "He just wouldn't settle without a swaddle," she explained. I bit back my frustration, nodding politely while inside I seethed. It was more than just a disregard for my instructions, it was a blatant disrespect for my role as Ethan's mother. Strike one, I thought bitterly. That night, as Jack slept soundly, I lay awake, Ethan's soft breathing the only sound in the dark room. The incident replayed in my mind, fueling a growing resolve. I needed to be firmer, set clearer boundaries. My child's safety was at stake, and I wouldn't let anyone grow, not even Mrs. Harper, undermine that. Weeks had passed since the first incident, and my trust in Mrs. Harper remained shaky. Yet, when Jack suggested another brief outing, a movie this time, I agreed, but with one addition: I had installed cameras in the house. It wasn't just about watching Ethan, it was about ensuring my instructions were followed. Before leaving, I walked Mrs. Harper through Ethan's routine again, stressing the importance of using the sleep sack and not swaddling him with a blanket. I also asked her to send me pictures or updates, as being away from Ethan still made me anxious. Her response was curt, almost dismissive. "Maybe, if I have time," she said, adding that I should keep my phone silent in the cinema. Her tone stung, and I left feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. In the dim light of the movie theater, I found myself checking the live feed on my phone more than watching the screen. Mrs. Harper seemed to be taking adequate care of Ethan, but there were no messages, no pictures, nothing. Frustrated, I nudged Jack, whispering about what was happening. Reluctantly, he texted his mother, and only then did a couple of photos come through. It wasn't just about the pictures. It was her attitude, the way she disregarded my requests as if they were unimportant. After the movie, Jack tried to reassure me. "She sent the photos, didn't she?" he said, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't about the photos. It was about respect, about listening to the mother of the child she was caring for. I felt a growing rift, not just with Mrs. Harper, but with Jack too, for not understanding my concerns. That night, as I held Ethan close, feeding him before bed, I felt a deepening resolve. This wasn't something I could just let slide. My role as a mother was being questioned, my instructions ignored. It was more than just a simple disagreement. It was a fundamental clash of beliefs and values about how to care for my child. And I knew then that something had to change. In the weeks that followed, the tension between Mrs. Harper and me grew palpable. Each visit from her seemed to widen the gap of misunderstanding and distrust. Jack, trying to play the mediator, often found himself caught in the crossfire of our silent battles. The third strike came unannounced, on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. Mrs. Harper was babysitting Ethan while I caught up on some work from home. From my study, I could hear her cooing and talking to Ethan, a sound that should have brought comfort, but instead heightened my alertness. I decided to check on them, a decision that led to the ignition of a smoldering conflict. I found Mrs. Harper pulling Ethan's hands away from his mouth, her actions more forceful than necessary. "He'll become a thumbsucker if you let him do that," she scolded, not noticing my presence. I watched, horrified, as she aggressively shoved a pacifier into his mouth. My heart raced. This was not just about a pacifier or thumbsucking. It was about her overstepping, controlling how I chose to raise my son. I confronted her then and there, my voice firm yet trembling with restrained emotion. "Mrs. Harper, it's perfectly normal for babies his age to explore with their hands. Please don't do that." Her response was a mix of disbelief and defiance. "I raised 3 children. I think I know what I'm doing," she retorted, her tone dismissive. The final straw came later that day when we argued about how to put Ethan to sleep. Despite my insistence on following pediatrician recommendations to lay him on his back, Mrs. Harper argued relentlessly for the old ways she was accustomed to. It was a clash of generations, of old beliefs versus new, scientifically backed practices. That evening, as I lay in bed, a torrent of emotions swept over me. Frustration, anger, helplessness. Jack, sensing my distress, tried to offer comfort, but his words felt empty. "She means well," he said, but that was no longer enough. Mrs. Harper's actions were not just infuriating, they were a direct challenge to my authority as Ethan's mother. I realized then that my relationship with Mrs. Harper had reached a critical point. I could no longer allow her to undermine my parenting choices, no matter her intentions. The safety and well-being of Ethan were paramount, and I was determined to protect that, even if it meant confronting and possibly alienating Mrs. Harper. My role as a mother was clear, and I knew I had to stand my ground for Ethan's sake. Spring brought with it a new challenge, one that threatened to upend the precarious balance I had managed to maintain with Mrs. Harper. During a casual family dinner, she announced her retirement, her voice laced with a mix of pride and anticipation. What followed, however, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. She offered to become Ethan's full-time caregiver, a proposition that caught me completely off guard. Jack seemed thrilled by the idea, seeing it as a perfect solution. "Think of the money we'll save on childcare," he said enthusiastically. But for me, the thought of leaving Ethan in Mrs. Harper's care every day was daunting. Her previous actions, her disregard for my parenting choices, echoed loudly in my mind. That night, as Jack slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, wrestling with the dilemma. On one hand, there were the undeniable financial benefits, and on the other, my deep-seated concerns about Mrs. Harper's approach to childcare. It wasn't just about differing opinions. It was about the safety and well-being of my son. I found myself torn between the pragmatic part of me that recognized the practicality of the offer and the maternal instinct that screamed against it. Could I trust Mrs. Harper to respect my wishes and care for Ethan as I wanted? The answer, based on past experiences, seemed grim. The days that followed were filled with internal debates and discussions with Jack, who couldn't understand my hesitation. She's his grandmother. She won't do anything to harm him, he reasoned. But it wasn't about harm in the conventional sense. It was about respecting my role as Ethan's mother, about adhering to the practices and precautions I deemed necessary for his well-being. As spring blossomed into summer, the pressure to make a decision mounted. Mrs. Harper's offer hung over our household like an unspoken ultimatum, challenging my convictions as a parent. The thought of her becoming Ethan's primary caregiver filled me with a sense of foreboding. I knew I had to make a choice, one that would not only affect our current circumstances, but also define the boundaries of our family dynamics for years to come. In the end, the decision came down to a simple, yet profound realization. My responsibility as Ethan's mother was to ensure his safety and happiness, even if it meant making the difficult choice of saying no to Mrs. Harper. It was a decision that wouldn't be easy to communicate, but one that I knew was necessary. My resolve was clear, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The decision to decline Mrs. Harper's offer weighed heavily on me, like a stone in my stomach. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of the impending confrontation filled me with dread. It wasn't just about saying no to her. It was about asserting my role as Ethan's mother and setting boundaries that had long been blurred. I approached Jack first, hoping to find an ally in him before facing Mrs. Harper. We sat down one evening after Ethan was asleep, the soft glow of the nightlight casting shadows across the room. "Jack, I've thought a lot about your mom's offer," I began, my voice steady but laced with anxiety, "and I've decided that it's not the best option for Ethan or for us." Jack looked surprised, maybe even a bit disappointed. "But think about the money we'd save," he argued, echoing his earlier sentiments. I nodded, acknowledging the practicality of his point. "I understand that, but this is about more than money. It's about Ethan's well-being and having our parenting choices respected," I explained, my words deliberate, conveying the seriousness of my concerns. The conversation that followed was difficult. Jack struggled to see my perspective, rooted in his trust and love for his mother. But as I laid out my reasons, highlighting the past incidents and Mrs. Harper's dismissive attitude towards my parenting choices, he began to understand. It wasn't an easy acceptance, but it was a start. With Jack's reluctant support, I braced myself for the conversation with Mrs. Harper. I invited her over for coffee, a neutral setting for what I anticipated would be a challenging discussion. As she sat across from me, sipping her coffee, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Mrs. Harper, I appreciate your offer to take care of Ethan. It means a lot, but I've decided that it's best for us to continue with our current childcare arrangement." Her reaction was a mix of surprise and hurt, her brows knitting together in confusion. "But why? I thought it would be perfect," she said, her voice tinged with disappointment. I explained my stance, carefully choosing words that conveyed respect but also firmness. "It's important for me to have certain practices followed, and while I value your experience, I feel more comfortable sticking to the advice of our pediatrician and current childcare provider." The conversation was tense, with moments of silent understanding and others filled with veiled frustration. In the end, Mrs. Harper left with a polite goodbye, the air between us thick with unspoken words. As the door closed behind her, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I had made my decision, set my boundaries, but at what cost? The future of our family dynamics hung in a delicate balance, but I knew that standing up for my beliefs and for Ethan's welfare was the right choice, no matter the challenges it might bring. The days following my conversation with Mrs. Harper were filled with an uneasy quiet. The air was thick with unspoken words and lingering tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface. It wasn't long before the storm broke. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Mrs. Harper had come over for a visit, her demeanor cordial but distant. As she interacted with Ethan, I could sense her holding back, her movements cautious, as if walking on a tightrope. The atmosphere was strained, a stark contrast to the easy familiarity that had once defined our gatherings. Then, as Ethan fussed in his playpen, Mrs. Harper turned to me. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I don't understand why you don't trust me with Ethan. I raised 3 children of my own." Her words hit me like a wave, pulling me into the undercurrent of our unresolved issues. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's not about trust, Mrs. Harper," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "It's about respecting the choices Jack and I make for Ethan. It's about his safety and well-being." What followed was a raw and honest exchange, the kind that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. Mrs. Harper expressed her feelings of being undervalued and misunderstood, while I shared my need for my role as a mother to be respected. We delved into our differing views on childcare, each of us standing our ground, yet trying to find common ground. The conversation was not without its moments of heat. Mrs. Harper's frustration was palpable, as was my determination to assert my authority as Ethan's mother. But, amidst the contention, there was also a sense of mutual understanding beginning to form, a recognition of each other's concerns and emotions. As the afternoon waned, the tension gradually eased, leaving in its wake a fragile truce. We had not resolved all our differences, but there was a newfound respect for each other's perspectives. Mrs. Harper agreed to try to respect my parenting decisions, and I acknowledged her experience and love for Ethan. That day marked a turning point in our relationship. It was the beginning of a journey towards mutual respect and understanding, one that would require patience, empathy, and open communication. The confrontation had been challenging, but it had opened the door to a potential path of reconciliation and compromise, a path that I hoped would lead to a more harmonious family dynamic. In the weeks that followed our confrontation, the dynamic within our family began to shift, subtly yet significantly. The air of tension that had once clouded our interactions with Mrs. Harper started to dissipate, giving way to a cautious but growing sense of understanding. Mrs. Harper's visits became more frequent, but they were different now. There was an unspoken agreement between us, a delicate balance of respect for each other's roles in Ethan's life. She was more mindful of my requests, and I, in turn, made an effort to appreciate her experience and perspective as a grandmother. Jack noticed the change too. He was relieved to see his mother and me finding a middle ground, and our relationship, which had been strained by the situation, began to heal. We had more open discussions about parenting and the roles of our extended family, conversations that brought us closer and strengthened our partnership. The most significant change, however, was within myself. The journey through the conflicts with Mrs. Harper had been a challenging one, but it had also been transformative. I found a new sense of confidence in my role as a mother, a deeper understanding of the importance of setting boundaries, and the courage to stand up for what I believed was best for Ethan. As spring turned into summer, our family settled into a new rhythm, one that embraced both tradition and change. Mrs. Harper became a supportive presence in Ethan's life, respecting the boundaries we had established. And I found a new respect for her, not just as Jack's mother or Ethan's grandmother, but as a woman with her own set of experiences and wisdom. Our story didn't have a dramatic conclusion, no definitive moment of triumph or defeat. Instead, it was a gradual journey towards mutual respect and understanding, a journey that taught us the value of empathy, communication, and compromise. As I watched Ethan grow, surrounded by love and care from all sides, I realized that our family's strength didn't lie in always agreeing with each other, but in our ability to navigate our differences with respect and love. And in that realization, I found not just peace, but a profound sense of gratitude for the family we were building together, with all its complexities and imperfections. I always believed in the power of a well-laid plan. As a mother of 2 with a career in project management, planning was not just a skill, it was my lifeline. But some moments in life, no matter how meticulously you plan, spiral in directions you never anticipated. The birth of my 3rd child was one such moment. It was a balmy evening in late August when I sat down with my husband Mark to finalize the birth plan. Our living room was quiet, a rare occurrence in a house usually filled with the rambunctious laughter and chaos of our 2 sons, aged 4 and 6. They were at my mother's house for the night, a small but significant detail in the tapestry of our plan. "Okay, so when I go into labor, you'll drive me to the hospital, and Mom will be there with us, right?" I confirmed with Mark, who nodded, his eyes scanning the spreadsheet I had created. "And your mom will pick up my mother, the kids, and Graham from Mom's house. Everyone's on board with this?" I asked, seeking one last confirmation. "Absolutely," Mark reassured me, squeezing my hand. "Your mom in the delivery room, my mom bringing the boys, and your grandmother. Everyone knows their roles." The plan was a delicate balance, crafted over months of discussions and negotiations. For both my previous deliveries, my mother had been my rock, guiding me through the storm of childbirth with a calmness that seemed almost supernatural. Especially after my last delivery, where complications had left me fighting for my life, her presence had been my anchor. I needed her there, again, for the birth of our daughter. Our daughter. The thought brought a smile to my face, mingling with the undercurrent of anxiety that had been my constant companion throughout this pregnancy. After 2 boys, the prospect of a girl had brought a new dimension to our family dynamic, one that filled me with both excitement and a hint of nervousness. "Everything will go as planned," Mark said, his voice laced with confidence I desperately wanted to mirror. "Your mom has been through this with you twice already. She wouldn't miss it for the world." I nodded, allowing his assurance to settle my frayed nerves. The plan was solid, everyone was on board, and all we needed was for nature to take its course. But as the night grew deeper, and our house settled into a quiet that felt both comforting and eerie, I couldn't shake off a nagging sense of unease. Little did I know, that unease was a premonition of the turmoil that lay ahead. It was a crisp morning in early September, the kind that hinted at the impending shift from summer to autumn. The sky was a canvas of soft blues and grays as I awoke to a familiar pressure in my lower back, a dull, rhythmic pain that had become an old acquaintance over the past few months. But this morning it felt different, more insistent, as if nudging me towards a realization. It took me a moment, amidst the haze of sleep, to understand. The baby was coming. Mark was already up, a silhouette against the dim light of dawn, when I whispered, "It's time." The urgency of the moment swept us into a well-rehearsed routine. While I focused on my breathing, Mark called our mothers. "We're headed to the hospital. It's time," he said, his voice a blend of excitement and nervousness. To my mother-in-law he added, "Please pick up Mom, the kids, and Graham. Remember the plan." I clutched the phone, wanting to hear my mother's voice. "I'm on my way, sweetheart," she said, her voice calm and steady, a balm to my escalating anxiety. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Mark's steady hand on mine was the only anchor I had as waves of contractions began to wash over me. Each wave was a crescendo of pain and anticipation, a reminder of the life I was about to bring into the world. We arrived at the hospital as the sun peaked above the horizon, casting a golden glow that felt like a good omen. The nurses greeted us with practiced smiles, ushering us into a delivery room that felt both alien and strangely welcoming. "Your mom will be here soon," Mark reassured me as he helped me into the hospital gown. The sterile scent of the room mingled with my growing fear. I needed my mother there, her presence a vital piece of my mental armor against the pain and fear. Minutes turned into an hour, and still there was no sign of my mother. The contractions were intensifying, a relentless tide that left me breathless and scared. Mark tried to soothe me, but his words were a distant echo against the roaring in my ears. Finally the door opened, but it wasn't my mother who walked in. It was my mother-in-law, alone, her face a mixture of excitement and something I couldn't quite place. My heart sank. "Where's Mom?" I managed to ask, my voice strained. She's not coming. I thought it would be better to let everyone rest. It's still early," she said, settling into a chair as if this were just a minor change in plans. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She had unilaterally decided to alter the plan, to deny me the one person I needed most. Panic and anger surged through me, drowning out the pain of the contractions. "Mark, I need my mom. Please call her. She needs to be here," I said, my voice barely a whisper amid the chaos of emotions. As Mark stepped out to make the call, I was left with my mother-in-law, her presence a stark reminder of the support I had been denied. In that moment, the delivery room felt more like a prison, a place where my carefully laid plans and hopes were crumbling around me. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls inching nearer with every ticking second. My mother-in-law sat there, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. The pain of each contraction was now intertwined with a piercing sense of betrayal. She had disregarded our plan, our agreement, and I felt abandoned in my most vulnerable moment. "Why didn't you bring my mom?" I asked, my voice laced with pain and anger. "She was supposed to be here. I need her." My mother-in-law looked up, her expression one of surprise, as if the weight of my words was lost on her. "I thought it would be best to let everyone sleep. It's not a big deal, honey. I'm here for you," she said, her tone attempting comfort but only fueling my frustration. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, disbelief sharpening my words. "You changed everything. I don't need you here. I need my mom." The room was spinning, a carousel of pain and anger. I clutched the bedsheets, trying to anchor myself to something, anything. The contractions were coming faster now, a relentless tide that left no room for respite. My mother-in-law's face hardened. "Your mother had her chance with your other births. It's my turn now. I'm just trying to be fair." "Fair?" I gasped, the word a bitter laugh. "This isn't about fairness. This is about what I need. And I need my mom." Mark returned, his face etched with worry. "Your mom is on her way. She'll be here as soon as she can," he said, taking my hand. But the damage was done. The sanctity of this moment, the birth of our child, had been tainted by a selfish act that I couldn't forgive. "I want her out," I said, nodding towards my mother-in-law. "She has no place here." The confrontation escalated. My mother-in-law refused to leave, her justifications a cacophony in the chaos of my labor. It wasn't until a nurse, sensing the rising tension, intervened that she was finally escorted out. Alone with Mark, I tried to focus on the impending birth, but the seeds of resentment had been sown. Each passing minute was a reminder of the trust that had been broken, of the support that had been selfishly withheld. When my mother finally arrived, the relief I felt was tempered by a lingering bitterness. She swept into the room like a soothing breeze, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. But as she held my hand and whispered words of encouragement, I couldn't shake off the shadow that had been cast over this moment. The joy of welcoming a new life into the world was overshadowed by a sense of loss, not just for the plan that had fallen apart, but for the family harmony that had been shattered. As my daughter took her first breath, her cries a melody of new beginnings, I knew that the rift that had formed would not be easily mended. As the hours passed, the delivery room became my world, a microcosm of pain and perseverance. The absence of my mother during those initial hours had left a void, one that was only partially filled when she finally arrived. Her comforting touch and familiar voice were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the undercurrent of betrayal that flowed through me. My mother-in-law's decision to ignore our plan, to prioritize her desires over my needs, had sown seeds of resentment that took root deep within me. Even as my mother soothed me, her words of encouragement mingling with the clinical instructions of the nurses, my mind kept returning to that betrayal. I felt robbed of the peace and support I had so carefully orchestrated for this moment. Labor is a storm. It is raw and primal, a test of endurance and strength. But this time it was also a battlefield of emotions. The physical pain of childbirth was amplified by the turmoil in my heart. Each contraction was a reminder of the support I had lost, the trust that had been broken. Mark was a constant presence, his hand a steady warmth in mine. But his attempts to comfort me seemed to falter in the face of my internal struggle. He was torn between his roles as a husband and a son, his own emotions a mix of concern, frustration, and helplessness. As I navigated the waves of labor, I found myself grappling with more than just the pain of childbirth. There was a sense of mourning for the experience I had envisioned, but lost. The joy of welcoming a new life was intertwined with grief for the harmony that had been shattered. In those long hours, my world reduced to the confines of that hospital room. The concept of time became elusive. Each minute stretched and contracted, marked only by the rhythm of my labor and the flood of emotions that accompanied it. When the moment of birth finally arrived, it was as if a storm had broken. The pain reached a crescendo, a tidal wave that threatened to overwhelm me. But through it all, there was a sense of determination, a resolve to bring my child into the world despite the chaos that surrounded her arrival. My daughter's first cry was a sound of pure, unadulterated life. It cut through the fog of pain and resentment, a clarion call that anchored me back to reality. As they placed her on my chest, her tiny body warm and quivering, I felt a surge of love that momentarily pushed aside the bitterness. But even as I held her, marveling at the miracle of her existence, the joy was tainted. The presence of my mother, comforting as it was, couldn't fully compensate for the absence of my other loved ones. The promise I had made to my sons, to have them there to meet their sister, was unfulfilled. And the gap that had formed between me and my mother-in-law seemed like a chasm too wide to bridge. In those first moments with my daughter, amidst the swirl of conflicting emotions, I knew that the journey ahead would be about more than just adjusting to life with a new baby. It would be a journey of healing, of navigating the complex terrain of family dynamics and personal hurt. The days following the birth of my daughter were a whirlwind of emotions. Joy, exhaustion, love, and an undercurrent of resentment all melded into one indescribable feeling. My daughter was perfect, a tiny bundle of life that brought a new sense of purpose and love. Yet the shadow of what transpired in the delivery room lingered, casting a pall over what should have been unadulterated happiness. As we settled back home, the reality of the situation began to fully sink in. My mother-in-law's actions had not only affected the birth of my daughter, but had also left a rift in our family. The resentment I felt towards her was a constant presence, an uninvited guest in every interaction. My husband, caught in the middle, struggled to navigate the tension. He tried to mediate, to bridge the gap that had formed between his mother and me. But the betrayal I felt was too deep, too raw to be easily soothed. His attempts, though well-intentioned, often felt like an added pressure to forgive and forget, to move on for the sake of family harmony. The reactions from the rest of the family varied. Some understood my anger, while others, like my mother-in-law, seemed baffled by the depth of my resentment. She didn't mean any harm, they would say, or she just wanted to be a part of the experience. But their words fell on deaf ears. The trust I had placed in her had been broken, and with it, the easy camaraderie we once shared. My mother, ever the peacemaker, encouraged me to talk it out with my mother-in-law. She's family, she reminded me. But the thought of facing her, of having to articulate the pain and betrayal I felt, seemed like an insurmountable task. The wound was still too fresh, the emotions too volatile. The most painful aspect of it all was the impact on my children. They had been excited to meet their sister at the hospital, a promise we had made but couldn't keep. Their disappointment was a reminder of the wider repercussions of my mother-in-law's actions. It was a lesson in the complexities of adult relationships that I wished they hadn't had to learn so soon. In those first weeks, as I navigated the challenges of caring for a newborn, the emotional turmoil added an unexpected layer of difficulty. The usual challenges of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes were compounded by a sense of loss, not just for the birth experience I had envisioned, but for the family unity that had been compromised. As time passed, the initial intensity of my anger began to fade, giving way to a lingering bitterness. The joy of my daughter's presence was a balm, but it couldn't entirely heal the rift that had formed. The relationship with my mother-in-law had been altered irrevocably, and I found myself grappling with the reality of what that meant for our family's future. In the weeks that followed, the rawness of my emotions began to dull, replaced by a persistent ache. The birth of my daughter, a time that should have been filled with pure joy, was overshadowed by a lingering sense of what had been lost. The relationship with my mother-in-law, once warm and cordial, had cooled into something distant and strained. Mark, ever the optimist, believed time would heal the rift. He encouraged conversations, family dinners, attempts to bridge the gap that had formed. But each interaction with my mother-in-law was a reminder of the trust that had been broken. Her presence, once comforting, now served as a trigger for the hurt and anger that bubbled beneath the surface. My mother, a constant source of support, urged me to find a way to forgive. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she would say, quoting a phrase she had always believed in. But the path to forgiveness seemed obscured, hidden beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. The dynamics within our extended family had shifted. Family gatherings, once a source of happiness and unity, now felt like navigating a minefield. Conversations were cautious, laughter forced, as if everyone was acutely aware of the undercurrents of tension. As for my children, they adapted to their new sister with the uncomplicated love that only children possess. They were blissfully unaware of the complexities of the adult relationships around them. Their innocence was a reminder of what was at stake, of the family harmony that needed to be restored, not just for my sake, but for theirs as well. In an attempt to find closure, I eventually agreed to a sit-down with my mother-in-law. It was a difficult conversation, filled with unspoken emotions and carefully chosen words. She expressed her perspective, her desire to be a part of the birth, and her belief that she had been making the best decision at the moment. I listened, the words washing over me, but found it hard to fully accept her explanations. The decision she made had been about her needs, not mine, and the repercussions were something I was still grappling with. The conversation ended with a tentative truce, an agreement to try and move forward for the sake of the family. But the ease of our previous relationship was gone, replaced by a cautious civility. In the months that followed, I focused on my family, on the joy that my daughter brought into our lives. Mark and I navigated the complexities of parenthood and our extended family dynamics, finding a new normal in the altered landscape of our relationships. The path to forgiveness and healing was not a straight one. It was filled with setbacks and moments of doubt. But with each passing day, the bitterness began to recede, giving way to a cautious hope for reconciliation. I realized that forgiveness was not a single act, but a process, a journey that required patience, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond the hurt. It was about finding peace, not just for myself, but for my family, a peace that was necessary for us to move forward, to rebuild the bonds that had been strained but not completely broken. Months turned into a year, and as the seasons changed, so did the dynamics within our family. The birth of my daughter, an event that had been marred by betrayal and conflict, slowly receded into the background, becoming a part of our family history, but not defining it. My relationship with my mother-in-law, once a source of warmth and support, had changed fundamentally. We had reached a point of civility, a mutual understanding that was more about coexistence than the closeness we once shared. I had learned to accept her presence in family gatherings, to engage in polite conversation, but the trust that had been broken was not easily rebuilt. The process of healing had been slow, a journey of introspection and understanding. I had grappled with my anger, the sense of betrayal, and the need to protect myself and my children from further hurt. But I had also come to recognize the value of family, of the intricate web of relationships that, despite their flaws, formed the tapestry of our lives. Mark had been my rock throughout this journey, a source of unwavering support and love. His ability to navigate the tension between his wife and mother, to provide comfort and understanding to both, had been nothing short of remarkable. Together, we had found a way to move forward, to focus on the joy and love that bound our family together. The lessons I had learned were not just about forgiveness, but about the complexities of human relationships. I had come to understand that people, even those closest to us, can make choices that hurt us deeply. But holding on to anger and resentment only served to prolong the pain. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about condoning the actions of others, but about freeing myself from the hold of negative emotions. It was a gift I gave myself, a way to find peace and move forward. As I watched my daughter grow, her milestones a series of joyful discoveries, I was reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Her laughter, uninhibited and pure, was a balm to the lingering wounds of the past. Our family had changed, but it had also grown stronger in unexpected ways. We had learned to navigate our differences, to find a balance between the need for individual respect and the importance of family unity. As I reflect on the journey, on the pain and the healing, I am reminded of the unpredictability of life and the resilience it demands. The experience with my mother-in-law, though fraught with challenges, taught me invaluable lessons about empathy, boundaries, and the complex nature of love and forgiveness. Looking back, I see not just a story of conflict, but one of growth and understanding. It's a narrative that underscores the fact that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can choose how we respond to them. My response, ultimately, was to embrace forgiveness, not for the sake of my mother-in-law, but for my own peace of mind and for the well-being of my family. As I watch my children play, their laughter echoing in our home, I'm reminded of the importance of moving beyond past hurts. In their innocence and joy, they embody the spirit of forgiveness and the endless capacity for love. They are a constant reminder that despite life's trials, our capacity to love and to heal is boundless. This journey has also reinforced the importance of clear communication and setting boundaries. My experience has taught me to be more vocal about my needs and expectations in relationships, ensuring that my voice is heard and respected. In the end, the story of my daughter's birth is not just about a moment of betrayal. It's a testament to the power of healing and the strength of the human heart. It's about finding a way to coexist and maintain family ties, even when they are tested by conflict and misunderstanding. As I close this chapter of my life, I look forward with hope and a deeper understanding of myself and the people around me. The scars remain, but they are a part of who I am, a reminder of the journey I've been through and the lessons I've learned. They speak of my strength, my capacity to forgive, and my unwavering commitment to my family.